right, well, good evening to one and all. Thank you for taking time out of your schedules to join me. I'm Todd Christie, Speaker of the House for the Michigan Dental Association House of Delegates. If you hear barking in the background, yes, that's my Labrador. Somebody's coming in. My wife is just getting home. But anyway, for tonight, it is our new delegate and alternate delegate information session. And I would just want to share some thoughts for those of you who are new to the Michigan Dental Association House of Delegates. And I know there's some who are not so new that are just trying to glean information as well. So thank you all for joining us. To tell you about myself, I was lucky enough to get started in the House of Delegates back in 1998. I was an alternate delegate, like many of you, is my first time, and we were meeting down at Cobo Arena down in Detroit. And I was there for my first meeting, and I got put on a reference committee, and I had no clue what I was doing because no one told me a thing. Now, some may say nothing has changed, that I still don't know, but I think I've learned a couple things here over the past years. The next year, our delegate decided not to show, and suddenly I was a delegate and a chairperson for our delegation. So trial by fire is how I learned to get to where I am today. Let's go through and take a look first here. There's where we're going to be in 94 days is the first meeting of the House of Delegates. So those of you who are excited, we're at 94 days. Get ready for being there at the Suburban Collection Showplace for the first meeting of the House of Delegates, which is on April 28th. So in under an hour tonight, here's what I want to touch through with you all. And as well as I said before, if there's any questions that you have, you can put those in the chat. Michelle will be watching those. And if I can't see it, if they don't pop up for me, she'll let me know as well. So we're going to go through some important things because one thing with any organization is acronyms. We're going to see what all those words mean with the shortened up text. Next, the MDA House of Delegates, its members, its role and powers that it has, the roles that you have as delegates and alternates, the role that I have as the Speaker of the House, what are the committees of the House of Delegates, the MDA manuals and documents specific to the House of Delegates, and last, some parliamentary procedures, resolutions, and motions. And as well, you'll see, we'll talk about voting. Now, one part for many of you, and every body is different. Every house, every component, every board you're on is something different. I know we've got members here that have been on our insurance and financial group board or the MDA Foundation board or on a committee of the Michigan Dental Association. Each one is unique as well as the house. So I want to give you, like I said, some insight as to how our house runs. And at any point, as I said, now or after this, you'll have my email, and you'll always have that because it's on the Delegate Digest, email and phone. If you have a question, please make sure to reach out to me, or as well, you can reach out to Michelle Nichols-Cruz, who's the governance manager. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's take some easy ones here. First, that we have acronyms in the Michigan Dental Association. First, House of Delegates. This is the HOD. We have the RC, or the House of Delegates Reference Committee, that you'll see. Next, the BOT, the BOT for the Board of Trustees. And one more here is the Executive Committee, or EC. And I believe that's all the four big ones that we have. Let's see, that was it. So you'll hear me, if I apologize if I get going at times, and I will throw acronyms in, but so you know, your HOD is the House, RC Reference Committee, the BOT, the Board of Trustees, and the EC. These are actually how they're in my phone when I have a meeting. And actually my wife has learned these over the years too. So I really appreciate her doing that for me. So let's go through and take a look at the members. Now in our House of Delegates, there are two groups. We have all the members, we have voting and non-voting. So first, let's take a look and see what we have here. So in your House of Delegates, we have 102 voting members. Of those, 100 come from the components. The other 2 come from the University of Michigan, has one, and the University of Detroit Mercy has one delegate. Now, with all the delegates that we have, each group is allowed to have the same number of alternate delegates. We know that most components don't typically fill those slots that they have, or the full slate of what they have for alternates as well as delegates, but it's a great opportunity for people to gain knowledge and get some practice at being it. That's how I got to be so involved with it, because we did have an alternate delegate slots, and they did fill them back in the day. And I always encourage folks to do that. It's one of the things we talk about even for the American Dental Association. For your delegation that goes is to filling those slots, so we have lots of involvement, because that's where future leaders come from. Let's take a look at the other part, which is the members who are non-voting. Now, right now, those that are on there, the officers and members of the MDA Board of Trustees, are also in the House of Delegates without vote. Additionally, you'll see MDA former presidents, of which I know I'm looking at Dr. Mark Johnston, a former president as well, ADA council members, and MDA committee chairs. Now, for those members that are on all of those slates you see, they can be determined as voting if they're duly elected as delegates from their respective component societies. So just because we have a former president, if he's the representative from Central District, then he would be able to vote as a delegate from Central District. Same with those with ADA Council and also from committee chairs. That's where we have the non-voting side. So there are more than just 102 who sit inside the House of Delegates. Now, let's take a look at the roles for delegates. Now, I will say this is the role for alternates as well, because in case something changes, you're going to need to step in and be available. So this is how we prepare. So what the role is. Now, we'll look at the role overall. This is the big role, and I'll have some other defined duties in later on in this, but to support and advance the profession of dentistry and the oral health of residents of the state of Michigan. So we look at this as that we establish and support the mission statement, the bylaws of our association, with a focus on policy, advocacy, professional practice, and representation of the members. This is the highfalutin thing for what we talk about is what the role of our delegates is with it as well. We're going to define more of this as to what specifically you'll be doing in the House of Delegates too. So next, we're going to look at the powers of the House of Delegate for what areas that the House has purview over and taken care of. Now, first, this is one, it reads a little funny, but I want to talk about it as well. It says, advise the Board of Trustees regarding any matter of importance to the association. The Board of Trustees will act on all resolutions adopted by the House no later than the second Board of Trustees meeting following the House of Delegates meeting. So overall, the House of Delegates provides counsel, gives recommendations to the board. The board will act on those. Now, if I want to tell you specifically in this, like my first year, the House enacted and had a resolution that encouraged the Speaker of the House to form a subcommittee or form a committee that would evaluate remote meetings. So lo and behold, we had that, and we actually, when I says the second meeting, immediately following the second meeting of the House of Delegates, there is a board meeting. That's the first meeting. The second meeting that we will have is the June board meeting. And so usually by that June board meeting, whatever the House asks the Board of Trustees to look at, the board will act by that one. Well, the good news is that we looked at that 6 years ago, it is now, or 5 years ago now, regarding remote meetings. And guess what? Here we are today with a board and association committees that are able to meet remotely in order to get the work of the association done. So that request from the House is what got us ready, you might say, to be ready for the last 24 months of fun that we've been on Zoom. So we've been using Zoom a bit, but we brought communities of interest in within the association to get ready for this, for what was requested by the House. So next, the House is in charge of the bylaws of the Michigan Dental Association. There'll be more on that later, but the House has purview over that. Next, it also, regarding the standards of ethics and the code of professional conduct, falls into the lap of the House to make decisions on that. Controls the House of Delegates agenda for what we talk about. You'll see that coming out of one of our groups later, the Committee on Credentials, Rules, and Order, for how we set up the order of the House for what we'll be talking about. Act on any matter brought before it by a delegate or the Board of Trustees. So any resolution that is brought forward, that is, once we read it into the House, that's where you'll be discussing and making decisions on that. Can also originate and act on resolutions. So members of the House, components, any individual delegate can write resolutions and bring those to the House for evaluation and to have decisions made on those. Next page, we have elect the officers of the association, elect the members of the Board of Trustees, amend any procedures of conduct for the House of Delegates business, establish the special committees of the House of Delegates if we have any, as I told you about before, and elect the delegates and alternate delegates to the American Dental Association House of Delegates that are not officers or trustees or to fill any delegate position not filled. So one of the parts that you'll see in our discussions coming up will be that, as it says, you see the elect the officers, which is the executive committee, electing the members of the board, as well as electing the delegates and alternates. So one of the big things we do have is the election process. And those elections typically, if there is a contested election, will take with introductions on Thursday at the first meeting. Those elections typically will take place at the second meeting if they weren't dispensed at the first meeting. So let's go to the last one here. I have not seen this in my 25 years. I don't remember seeing that the House has ever removed an officer or a trustee from office without cause at any meeting of the House of Delegates upon the affirmative vote of 3/4 with that. I've not seen that. Also, electing the American Dental Association District 9 trustee, who at this moment is on a board meeting for those who arrived a little late. She's on that meeting as her husband here. He is on this meeting with us. So I told you about what the duties are, and I read that expansive paragraph earlier, but let's take a look at what the role is and what to do. So most importantly, that you serving as a delegate or an alternate, you're representing your component dental societies, bringing those unique conversations about the issues impacting the practice in your area, as well as what your component's unique needs are. That is who you represent coming to our House of Delegates. Most importantly is communicating the observation and needs to the House through the House of Delegates. Now, at any point in your component leadership, there is outreach going on before every board meeting. Everyone should know who your trustees are from around the state and reach out to them to get them involved, which is one part for those who've been on this House of Delegates before. Knows one of the big things I've been pushing for the last 2 years is making sure you know who your trustees are so you can voice and give observations and see for assistance or ideas that you have throughout the year. Here's the next part. Communicate with the board as a delegate or as a delegation. I know at our board meetings we do have it, and I was excited we had a delegate who had not attended before came to our December board meeting. The role of an alternate or delegate is not just for those 2 days a year during annual session. It goes throughout the year. Now, it doesn't mean I'm going to call you up or anyone will call you up, but you know what? Sometimes we do just to get an opinion. And that's an important thing to be ready to be as a role as being an alternate or a delegate. Serving in that, there are certain obligations is to be well informed on the issues confronting the profession and the MDA. Let's pay attention, read up on things, look at the journal, see what else you're seeing outside of what you get through the Michigan Dental Association. Now, here's the one part I did say a little bit earlier, but serving as the communicator between your constituency and the MDA board. It's critical and requires attending component dental meetings. So you as an alternate or delegate should be at your board meetings, should be at your larger meetings that you may have and hear what's going on. I know that just recently, Dr. Mayhofer, the MDA president, was just up at Saginaw Valley meeting with constituents and meeting with the members there to hear their concerns, to provide information out there. And that's a unique thing that we're able to do in person as well as virtually. I know sometimes I've been called in a couple times just to meet with delegations, which I do appreciate. And I know that your trustees who serve you are always willing to do that. And I know we have 3 of them on the call here tonight, and I'll point them out later if you want, but look at that list and invite them to your board meetings, but get to know who they are. Other roles. Now, the term, as I said, is from 1 administrative year, from House meeting to House meeting, until we seat you at the following, and you still are a member of the House going forward. So after April 30th here, you still are a member of that House, and you still will get emails from me and Michelle as well. So please pay attention to all those and act. If there's a question, always let us know. So attend and participate in a House meeting is another role held during annual session. Most importantly, you're going to want to study that background information that you're going to get in advance. You'll be able to download all of the resolutions that'll be before the House, all the House information as well is available. Participate in discussions. This is before you meet. Hopefully you'll have a caucus for your region. For your delegation, find out what concerns you have. Better yet, when you have that conversation, if there's something you have a question on or want more insight or information from, please let me know. I'm here to help. Again, being strategic in where your organization, our Michigan Dental Association, is headed. And last, work with your component dental society to submit recommendations to the House. Again, I'm always available, as is Michelle Nichols-Cruz. Get her during the work week. You can always text or email me whenever, wherever. My wife will cringe when I say that, but it's true. And I'll get back to you when I can. Sooner the better. Now, the last part you'll see here is reading the Mda bylaws as well as the manual of the House of Delegates. Now, after this, as I said, this is being recorded. Michelle's also going to send out, so you'll have the link through the MDA website to go through and find the MDA bylaws and the manual of the House of Delegates. So if you want to download those and read through those, that's always a good thing to do to learn more about the House of Delegates and the bylaws. So next part for your role, attending and participating in any scheduled component region caucuses before the House. Now, many components will meet that month prior, so April 28th. You know, I know probably once everyone gets through the end of March, you might be seeing dates prior to that. So making sure you attend those and can learn what's going on. I know some regions will meet remotely, looking probably regions 1, 2, and 3 with the Upper Peninsula in the northern Michigan. Typically, they may well be meeting remotely. I know West Michigan Steering Committee, they cover the west side of the state. They typically will meet about 2 weeks before, 3 weeks before up in Grand Rapids or in Kalamazoo. With other regions, wherever, whenever, get to those meetings. Now, I said this a little bit earlier, it says honor the obligation to keep up with the speaker and the communications that we have. This is important. You know, you'll get information that comes out regarding committees. You'll get information regarding the board. You can go through and find all of these as well is on the MDA website for governance. And we can probably have that in our links as well. So it's a one-stop shop to find out what's going on. You know, on that one, review what's going on from the Board of Trustee and the committee minutes. You know, a number of you may well have committee appointments, or you know folks on there, but go through and read what's going on in the committees. That's an important part too. And last, know who your MDA officers and trustees are and communicate ideas, suggestions, issues, and concerns. You know, if there's whether it's a concern, a suggestion, you can reach out to any one of those individuals, including myself, as I said, regarding this. And I think it's very important to do because communication is the key. All right, so what's my role? I've already told you your role. I better tell you what I'm supposed to be doing too. So I get to conduct the meetings of the House of Delegates, whether the 2 that we have during annual session or any of those that follow after. I'm supposed to preside, as I do, impartially over the debate, ensuring that for the procedural rules are being followed. It's all about the procedures. It's all about parliamentary procedures and being fair to all. Ensuring that proper decorum is observed during debate. We don't put up with, and I do not, as your chair, put up with anything that is other than professional. Maintaining order. Yes, I have a gavel and I know how to use it. Ruling on points of order if there's questions, letting you know if there's a question, point of information, getting those answered, but most importantly is rules of order that we follow pursuant to the American Institute of Parliamentarians, the standard code that we use. Ensuring that the votes that we take are accurately and that they're announced so you know what you voted upon. Protecting the rights of all members. Making any appointments, I said, to the committees of the House of Delegates, and we'll have a little bit more on the House committees we have already. And last, what we're doing right here is providing training and information regarding parliamentary procedure and support to the House of Delegates. So tonight, if you came in to learn more about how to make a motion or something, that'll be at the subsequent meeting we're going to have in March. This one is more, as I said, just a training to tell you what all is going on in the House of Delegates or how it's set up. Now, I want to go through and review the committees of the MDA House of Delegates. So the first one we have is the Committee on Credentials, Rules, and Order. Now, this is made up of 3 delegates. You'll see a little bit between some of the committees where some allow alternates and some are delegate specific. So this one is the one who reviews recommends that the current House of Delegates manual be adopted for the current year. Additionally, can recommend changes for the coming year as well. And last, it determines and records the number of delegates present at each meeting of the House to certify that a quorum is present. So this is one group. As I said, it's a small group. Typically, I know this group will have one meeting coming up here. You'll see that date a little later on. They will go through and review the House of Delegates manual, make any recommendations on changes for the coming year. And then as well, these 3 individuals that when we're at the House, if there's a change where an alternate delegate needs to be moved to a delegate, they are the ones who oversee that decision and make sure it's being made correctly. And so that those individuals can be seated as delegates for the second meeting of the House. Typically, it's between Thursday and Saturday or between the first and second meeting when changes do occur. Last, if there is any question or any dispute over seating, assignment, or certification of a delegate, this is the group that oversees that decision. So for this year, here are the 3 individuals you can see from Genesee, Gogebic, and from Livingston who are representing their components or the constituents. These are the members of the House. These 3 delegates are the ones who serve on the credentials, rules, and order for this year. So this is something new. I know I told Michelle I wanted to put this on so everyone can see who will be serving in the different committees. Just so you know, because hopefully you'll know somebody on here. If not, it's somebody you haven't met yet, then I believe you will know. So let's go on to the next group. The next group we have here is Committee on Bylaws, Language Review. So this is up to 7. Again, this is delegates and alternates. The only one we have that is delegate specific is just that credentials, rules, and order. Now this group will go through and receive and review in advance of annual session the language and structure of proposed amendments to the bylaws that have been submitted for consideration. So they'll go through and read through those to make sure that everything matches up. We don't want to miss anything in the bylaws when it comes to making those changes. Excuse me. So this group is looking to identify any potential conflicts with the bylaws provisions from the proposed amendments to the bylaws and assist to make sure it's legible, it's understandable for those. Now, the one important thing is that this group committee is not empowered to prevent any adoption of any proposed amendment. All they're doing is it's like checking the grammar and making sure everything makes sense to what goes on. If there's considerations or changes, inclusion of any additional amendments to do that is there, but this group does not go through to prevent the adoption of anyone, is to review the context and the language of it. Now, for this year, I have one more person I am waiting to hear back from, but here are the ones for the Committee on Bylaws, Language Review for coming up. And you can see we've got the 5 individuals. I got one more that we'll be adding once I hear back from them. And I'm excited. It's the last person I'm waiting to hear from for all the stuff for the House. So let's move on. The next group we have is the Reference Committee, as I said earlier, the RC. The Reference Committee meets following the first meeting of the House of Delegates to review all resolutions as well as documents, anything else submitted to the House. So this is where reports come in, and they're reviewing reports, as well as I said, reviewing all resolutions. What they do is they conduct an open hearing, typically takes about an hour. For those who might have looked back, and I'll say in the old days, my first year, I remember, I believe we had 4 reference committees, maybe 3 back in the day. And that was before our governance made some changes to make it more nimble for us, when the House met once a year and everything had to be decided then. But in today's governance that we work with, the board has certain areas it concerns, and then the bylaws and, as I said, the ethics and the House manual, those are all falling under the purview of the House. And so this group meets, they sit up in front, we go through and they read in each resolution, or they read each resolution and take testimony from member dentists who give their opinion on a resolution. If they can recommend or say, I'd like to change this, or I'd like more information here, they're able to provide and get more information for them. As well, they'll take notes. And so this group goes through following that open hearing and goes into executive session. So just these members are in there, along with the MDA staff who works with them. So Michelle Nichols-Cruz, and we have others that are there from the governance manager on through to help if there's any recommendations that has. So they report their recommendations to the House. So you could have a resolution before the House and 20 people come up and speak against it and no one speaks for it. Most times in that regard, the group will say with a recommendation to vote no, and that will come up at the second day of the House. And so you'll hear from what the information they took in and what their recommendation for the House is to do with that motion before them. So this one, as I said, there's a few more folks on here as well. And actually, I see I am missing one that I know about, Michelle, and I'll get that corrected as well. We do have a, you can see from covering our areas here, but also I do have a dental student on here from the University of Detroit Mercy. And I had that on there, and somehow he's not on there now. So we'll get that back on there. But excited to have these individuals and thanking them for their service, as well as everyone else on the committees to do that. Let's keep moving through here. So next, as I talked about a little bit earlier, the manuals and documents for the House of Delegates. Now, this, as I said, we'll have the link in there so you can go pull this up and read through it. So the House of Delegates reviews the commonly used rules of order that a delegate or alternate may encounter and how they apply to the House of Delegates. Also, once the fundamentals are mastered, the delegate will be able to participate in the functions of the House with a greater comfort level and effectiveness. Well, the part is when you get the House of Delegates manual, About 2/3 of the way through, it does go through and discuss making motions, reviews more of what things are. And I have more a little bit later on here as well. But this is a good kind of primer to go through and read up on regarding how the House of Delegates works. There's a lot of information here that appears in the AIP, the American Institute of Parliamentarians, their standard code, which is the book we follow regarding parliamentary procedure. And so it has a lot of the snippets from that are in there just as a beginner's course, let's say. The other part besides the House of Delegates manual is the Mda Bylaws. Now, these define the name and the purpose of the MDA and how it should work. It specifies who are the members, how are the officers and committees chosen, how and when they meet, and what the rights and obligations that they all have. So the bylaws are permanent rules. So they shouldn't be changed lightly. So many times we'll see, like for those areas that fall into the House of Delegates manual or other resolutions, many times you'll hear votes. And I've got one I'm going to put in. I was pretty excited with all the rigmarole going on in Washington, D.C. right now. There's some really good fodder in there that I can put into my talks. When we take votes, and coming up later, we'll talk about the votes, is what kind of votes? Well, a bylaws change, in order to have a bylaws change be voted through, it has to have a 2/3 majority. So 2/3 more, we need to have that vote. If it was 52%, it's not passing. It needs a 2/3 majority. And so that's why it says they should not be changed lightly, as these are the permanent rules. So let's talk a little bit more on motions here, and we'll keep winding through all the content with it. As I said, I know there's more on voting coming later. So we follow parliamentary procedures used to bring the business before the House and to process some decision in an orderly manner. And so we use it as a presentation of motions. So a motion is a formal proposal presented to the House for its consideration and decision. These motions could request an action. They could express an opinion or seek support on action taken by others, could seek legislation or establish a policy, as long as it's pursuant to what the overview and, for what the House can do. So here we go. Main motions are used to bring a specific substantive item of business before the Assembly. So they are all debatable, meaning you can talk about them, amendable, which means you can change them. They do require a majority vote to pass and can be reconsidered or removed. So the important thing here is on the main motions, you can change it, talk about it, and then you can decide to pass it or not pass it. It's what comes down to what the will of the House is. So realistically, when I use the word resolution, this is a main motion. That's how they're presented in the form of this, that to adopt the resolution. It's simply a motion in written form. Other things, and I don't know for many of you, if you've served in other groups, one of the parts that is unique to really the American Dental Association and Michigan Dental Association, and it is in the standard code we use, is a group called Adopt in Lieu of. If we get to this point now, we'll talk about it more in another time, but this is one way, for those of you who've had some parliamentary background, Adopt in Lieu of is part of standard code. They keep trying to make updates to it to make it easier to use. If and when we get to that point, if we do this year, I will make sure to explain it as clear as I can so everyone knows how it works. With that, we have had it in the past. Usually it's if you have 2 or 3 things that were all in that same motion or recommendations, they will take one or decide which one they think is best and say, we're going to take this one instead of all these other ones. And then we debate that one first. Again, that's for another night, but it's something that is unique. And if you've done anything parliamentary wise before, it's something that we'll talk more about for sure. So as I said, here's our Parliamentary Authority as the standard code from the AIP. Again, there's a couple things that we do not use if you're used to certain parts. One is in the House of Delegates with the 102 voting members in the House, plus everyone else I told you about, we don't do seconds. We don't go back for seconds. We don't do seconds. Because at the point that we're in with 102, probably somebody's just going to yell second out, or it slows the process of the House down. Now, if you came to a board meeting for the MDA, you'd see that a second is required. It's a much smaller body, and that's why we require those. But in a House of 102, it's a given that we're just going to go through. So if a motion is made, we process that through without requiring a second. Now, the other one is tabling. That says the motion to table shall not be used in the House of Delegates. Now, this might be for some called lay on the table. I move to table this resolution. reasonably speaking, what table means is kill it. That's all it is. There's other ways that we would go through and dispense with the motion, other than table. So we have not used that in our house. So let's keep moving on to voting here. So when we vote on resolutions, or when you vote on resolutions and I go through and help you determine what the outcome is of it. So most motions, as I said, in the House require a majority to be adopted. However, some motions require a higher vote, either 2/3 or 3/4 to be carried. So those are, as I said, the 2/3 vote is if to amend the bylaws. So anything we discuss prior to the vote on the overall bylaws change, let's say changing a word here, changing word, those are all considered a majority vote. So above 50%. Those can all change at that lower threshold, but in order to pass the bylaw and enact that, it needs to be a 2/3 vote. And as we talked earlier, the 3/4 or 3/4 to remove an officer or a trustee from the office without cause. Now, one other part you'll see, and I will use this, is voting by general consent. And this is where the principle is used at the discretion of the presiding officer to save time when deciding routine or non-controversial matters. It means all members of the assembly are in agreement on a question so that a formal vote is not necessary. This could be a word change. It could be something that makes a resolution or a motion work better. And you'll hear me call and ask for general consent regarding this. If there are no objections, we will change this. I will look and wait. And if no one raises a hand or yells anything out, we'll just move on as though that change is made. That's by general consent. And here, this is just the example of it. If there's no objection, the proposed amendment stands approved. That's what if anyone objects, that means that the agreement is not unanimous, and then I'll move and we'll take a vote on it. That's all. Like I said, it is a time savings. And typically I only utilize that when there has been discussion that has been in favor. Let's just dispense and move through that. Now, there are the 5 most common for the years I've been in the House of Delegates here are shown. Voice vote, yes, no, you'll hear me call for those. Show of voting cards, where you're holding up a card and I'm up there with the parliamentarian, Mr. Dan Schulte, and we will look out and get a feel for it. If I'm not certain of a vote, I will go and call through for an electronic vote. You'll have keypads when you come in for the second day, and we'll go through and stand at. We'll go through and do the vote by electronic vote. A standing count, which means we'd have you stand off and call off, or a written ballot. I haven't seen a written ballot in a number of years because we are using the keypads. Those keypads take the place of every other written ballot we've used. And that's why through AIP, as well as through the Roberts folks, those are indicated to do that. We make the investment to keep that simple because it is a timing issue. For those who on this call who sat through a written ballot for balloting for office, for elections, it adds on a great amount of time. We typically, by using the electronic vote, we'll speed that up and have our answers faster and clearer with that. And it is one where on a particular, I will go through and call for on all bylaws. I will call for an electronic vote because I want to see that, and you'll see it to my left. I'll have a screen in front of me that shows us what the results are. So everyone knows what the total is and whether or not the resolution passed. So I said electronic vote, captured electronically and verify that all had the opportunity. When we get to voting on Saturday, for those who are delegates on Saturday, when we're voting for, and I'll say in particular for the ADA delegation going forward, we'll go through and I'll give ample time. If there's a problem with the keypad, I will stop the voting and make a pause while we get that taken care of. With our group, we've done electronic voting on for the past years has been excellent. And as well, we have Chief Teller is over there working with them along with the MDA team to make sure everything is processed correctly. Last, as I said, the results we displayed on the screens in the House of Delegates. The only thing we do not go through is we do not project the elections for the election outcomes. I will announce the winners of the election and that we will not go through and post the numbers for that, for those elections. But let's move on. We'll go into the House of Delegates calendar for this year's meeting. So first we start, as I said, in 94 days. And if you're watching this later, you have to figure it out on your own. Thursday, April 28th, the first meeting of the House is at 8:30 a.m. Following that, we'll have a trustee forum, the reference committee, and we're working on putting a town hall together as well to follow that. With the trustee forum, currently we have 4 individuals who are running for the 3 slots. One individual is also running for the secretary treasurer. So if there is no one else who submits their name at the first meeting of the House of Delegates, they will be put into the role of secretary treasurer, elected by unanimous consent for that role. So then we'll be down to having 3 trustees for the 3 slots. If no one else puts their name in, we will probably forego that trustee forum as a matter of timing, because to go through and take an hour of debate, your time again to me is valuable, and you can meet all those trustees on your second day to get to know them. If you have any questions, most importantly is come to the meeting that I will be having on Wednesday, starting at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, the 27th. And that is a gathering for all the House of Delegates. Let's move on. On April 30th morning, your regional caucuses should be meeting. The earlier, the better. I will be up and going. Michelle and the whole crew from MDA will be ready for answer any questions, provide assistance as needed. With that, so the regional caucuses begin. And then the second meeting of the House begins promptly. As others who know me, we start promptly at the times we begin at, and that is how we do it. So that one starts at 1 o'clock and goes to close of business. So on here, I want to kind of point out, these are committees and meetings we've already got set up. Election Commission, we met last week, and that was with 1 member of the House of Delegates, along with myself serving as the chair and a president-elect, Vince Benavenia. We're on that commission meeting. Coming up March 14th is I guess that's a 2 for Monday maybe, but with March 14th with a committee, on credentials, rules, and order, followed by the bylaws language review committee. That date is in particular because by then all bylaws resolutions must be submitted prior to that, so that way that group has time to review those, given the timing of when bylaws changes must be submitted. On April 11th, I'll be meeting with the reference committee to review their duties and delegations for what they need to do. And that's what I'm doing with the CRO, the credentials, rules, and order, and the bylaws language. So I want everyone there to understand what their role is to make sure. And then last, as I said, on April 27th, the speaker's presentation. So you get to hear me again, but it'll be on a completely different topic. With that, I want to have that be more interactive, because when we're in person, we can be interactive and have different roles. We'll work through some resolutions, work through some motions so people can hear what goes on. Some of it's scripted, some of it's not, all of it is good. And then as well, meet the candidates for office, meet the candidates for Board of Trustees, meet the candidates for the delegation for the ADA. So that is one to please put on your agenda to make sure you make that. We are limited in size potentially, however, that is a good meeting to make it to. As well, these are other dates that you'll be getting, and these dates will also be in the email that comes out from Michelle, taking the place of this month's Delegate Digest. March 22nd will be an MDA delegate orientation. This is, though, for alternates and delegates. Tonight was just in particular for new folks coming in to do this, but more so, this one is delegate orientation. So I will be going through more in depth on a couple topics. If there's one you think of and want me to focus on, I'd be happy to. I always take suggestions. It also gives me 2 months from right now to prepare for it. I have one that I've done, but again, I always want to bring something new to it. I do have on the agenda here, you'll see as well, the MDA House of Delegates bylaws form. We did this 2 years ago. And if we have a number of ones that might have questions from folks, we're going to put this on there and bring the relevant parties to that and review the bylaws form so people can ask questions ahead of time. If we have between MDA staff, between anyone else bringing a bylaws change that there is discussion, we'll work this out. So this one is a little more fluid, and wait and see with this, because if we don't have bylaws changes coming, then we won't have that discussion. Again, more importantly, as I said, the regional caucus meetings should be occurring probably between the middle of March and the second week of April. So you can get those meetings in. Because by then we'll have all the resolutions should be out to all the delegates and alternates. So you'll be able to review and talk about those. On here is information I always put on here. You can screenshot it. That would make me so excited to see cameras up, take my picture of that content. I know a number of you, if you want, look at a delegate digest. You can always see my cell number or my email, as well as Michelle there to reach out and contact us with that. And that is what I have here tonight. I'm going to hit a stop share, pop back up into the full screen, and see if there are any questions, anything I need to go back to for you all, and help out with that. Again, anytime, anywhere, give me a call, give me a text, let me know what I can do to help. Otherwise, I start picking on people. No, I don't. And doing it that way as well. You will find, for those who have not met me in person before, and a number of you have, and I apologize for my behavior, but for those who haven't met me yet, yes, I will at these times joke around, have fun, but when I'm up on the podium with the gavel next to me, it is all business. I will smile at times as well, but the business of the house is the business of the house, and I'm there to help you with your business. Any questions that you have, any recommendations you have, anything I missed that you'd like me to bring up or work on for that meeting in March for the delegates and alternates? I know my Bernedoodle is out there barking. She has an idea. I'll have to hear. I see Michelle's dog is ready to talk to us as well. All right. Well, as I said, my goal is always, and for those who saw a presentation we did last year running a meeting, is always finish early. I always want to leave time for it. But again, I do appreciate and thank you for your service to the Michigan Dental Association, as well as to your components. I look forward to seeing you again on another one of these calls, but more importantly, I look forward to seeing you in 94 days at the first meeting of the House of Delegates, or even 93 when you come out to the Meet the Candidates and for my presentation in person there. Yes, you are very welcome. Again, for any of the new alternates or delegates, like I said, or any of the ones who've been there a few times, if you have a question, let me know. If you haven't heard from your delegation to set up your caucus prior, let them know to get it done. Go to your next board meeting. More importantly, like I said, when that information comes through and you get that link, go to the MDA website, read up on what the committees of your association are doing. Look at all that information. There is a lot there to go through. And just so you know, at the end of all this, after the House, I do send a survey out, and I will tell you, I have gleaned what I've gotten from these all and try and improve what I do for you each year with that, and getting the information out. So again, I want to thank you all. Thank you for the kind words in the chat. I do appreciate that, and look forward, as I said, to the coming year together. So, all right, folks, enjoy your evening, stay warm, and I'll see you in 3 days at that meeting. Thanks a lot.